Hello, hello! This video will be a short one showing how to access the space in between the outer hull panels of a ship and the internal structure of a ship. Now, when I say internal structure, what I'm describing, if I turn on my scanner by pressing the T button on my keyboard, is this orange-colored component. This is where the cockpit, living quarters, all that stuff are located within a ship. And what we are interested in accessing is the space in between this internal structure and the outer hull panels, because that space contains these delicious yellow cut points that will allow us to separate these outer hull panels from the internal structure. Now, how do we get there? Well, we can't get there most of the time from the outside. So there are ways to do this. Sometimes there are panels you can cut to try and get in there. You can use explosives later on to try and get in there. These can be problematic, particularly at higher hazard levels, because the ship is usually pressurized at that point. Now, if you're early in the game career, where you are at low hazard level ships, these here green rectangles will often be red, right? Where everything is depressurized, you can cut whatever you want, there won't be any problems. This ship obviously isn't that. This ship is completely pressurized. So if we were to try and access that internal space by cutting from the outside, that would inevitably result in explosive decompression, oftentimes making a bit of a mess. And so to avoid that, frankly, whether it's pressurized or not, you want to try and access that internal space from the inside of the ship. And so how do you do that? Step one, get inside the ship, usually via the airlock, right? Now,
Airlock pressurizing.
if you are fortunate, and for larger ships, you will almost always be fortunate, there will be a door somewhere in the ship, or the part of the ship, that leads from the internal structure to that compartment. And in this case, this Mackerel has such a door. So we can open up this door and see, oh, hey, now we're here. And at this point, you can start cutting to your heart's content. Now, I won't do that here because, as a reminder, this ship is pressurized. So as a bonus tutorial, what can you do in this case? Well, again, if you are fortunate and you have a functioning environmental control system, right, we can depressurize this internal compartment. But if we look at our scanner, right, oh, actually, it looks like the external ones are also depressurized here. Interesting. It's probably because of this part of the ship, which you won't have early on. But I bring this up because let's say this external space was still pressurized, which is pretty common because in a Mackerel, this external space is typically completely sealed, separated from the internal structure here. So why these doors are useful is if there is pressure outside and vacuum here on the inside, using Z or X, you can anchor your hand here and then open up this door, and this will cause, right, a mild pressure event, right? So as a general tip, you want to cause these pressure events to go from outside to in. If you go from inside to out, these external panels have a tendency to shatter and fragment, making a bit of a mess. And if there are loose pieces here, you can lose those loose pieces going out that way. The take home is, if these doors are present, they're really useful for two purposes. One, easy access to these internal space, and easy way to safely depressurize those external compartments. Larger ships, in my experience, almost always, if frankly always, maybe always, have these doors. The Mackerel doesn't. In my experience, the Mackerel actually usually doesn't have these convenient doors. So what can you do? You got a couple of options. Option one is, as we explained earlier, you can try and detonate or access from the outside. Not recommended, particularly if there's pressure. The two other options are, and this is the recommended one, finding panels like these. So these panels have a distinctive frame, and why these frames are useful is you see they're one segment. So if I burn away this frame, right, I can move this entire panel.
Salvage destroyed.
And if I had moved this stuff away earlier, get easy access in here, right? And so this does two things. One, gets us access to that internal space, and also, if there is a pressure differential, does a less clean version of the door pressure release, right? Where when we burn that frame, there will be an automatic uncontrolled decompression event, which again will be internal, so that's better. If you do that, I do recommend cleaning this area up first, so that you don't have potential explosions where, let's say this door is hurtled into this fuel tank, maybe that explodes, right? So if you're going to do this type of decompression, because you might have to, right, clean up this middle area as best you can. Another way, which is less recommended but still possible to access that space, is to actually cut away this back component. So this back thruster section is actually a single piece. So if we go ahead and shove that away, right, we see that we now have access to the same separate sites here. I don't recommend using this as your decompression method. Things get a lot messier when you have this large of an area, a lot more showering possible. But if everything is already decompressed, this is another way to get access to here. So in short, 3 main ways. Doors, if you have it, are best. If you don't have a door, you can burn away an internal panel to get access, or you can move this rear component out to get into here. As always, keep an eye on your pressure states, because you don't want violent decompressions, because that can shatter large sections of the ships if you are unlucky in that event. Hopefully this was helpful.